Hiya, I'm Bruce Fummey. It's the 13th of November. Now they say that the Jacobite cause came to an end here at Sherrifmuir on this date in 1715. But I want to talk about what they never tell you. If the people, places and events in Scottish history are of interest to you, then hit the subscribe button at the bottom right hand side of the screen at any time during this video. I've also left information, books and how to support the channel in the description below. You can even buy me a coffee or join the National Trust. But for now, let me tell you a story. So, beautiful Sherrifmuir here is the site of the battle. It's always cited as the battle where the Jacobite cause ended in 1715, although that ignores another battle which took place on the same day further to the south, but nobody ever talks about it. Now, to catch up those that don't know, in 1714, George, Elector of Hanover, was brought from what's now Germany to become King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Now, the year before, Scottish MPs had brought a bill to Parliament to dissolve the 6-year-old United Kingdom. Now, this new German-speaking king wasn't just unpopular in Scotland, but a lot of Scots thought, better to bring back our own Stuart king from France, because he'll dissolve this union for us. Now, let's be honest, that Stuart king was more concerned about himself. Another guy who only cared about himself was John Erskine, Earl of Mar. He'd been one of the commissioners for the union, and he had a plum job in the previous Queen Anne government. But this new German took away the plums. Time for an uprising, what do you think? Now, if you're in any doubt about the whole Jacobite thing, then I've got lots of videos in a playlist and I'll leave a link at the end. But on the 6th of September 1715, the Earl of Mar raised the standard of King James at Braemar. He started an uprising based in Perth, and it all ended here at Sherrifmuir on the 13th of November. Now, halfway between these two dates, on the 15th of October, he sent military veteran William Mackintosh from Perth south with 2,000 Highlanders. Now, they couldn't come this way round by Stirling because the Duke of Argyll guarded Stirling with government troops. They'd have to go through Fife and cross the Firth of Forth by boat. Now, the Duke of Argyll had ordered that all boats on the Fife coast should be destroyed to prevent just such an eventuality. I'll be honest, I've never had the money to have a boat on the Forth. I don't know if you have, but tell me in the comment section below, would you have destroyed your boat? The point is that when 2,000 Jacobite Highlanders arrived on the Fife coast, there were plenty of boats. And so overnight on the 11th of October, half of the force managed to cross. The next night, there were British Navy men of war cruising the Forth searching for Jacobites. Now, some were captured, but half still got through. And 1,500 Jacobites crossed the Forth and 2 days later captured the old citadel in Leith. The Duke of Argyll raced down from Stirling, stood outside the walls of the citadel and demanded their surrender. The Highlanders laughed at him. So he went back to Stirling. They headed for the borders. And so we've come to the borders. This is the town square in the quaint border town of Kelso. There's a ruined abbey, Floors Castle and other places of interest to visit. But if you were here in Kelso at 3 p.m. on the 22nd of October 1715, you would have heard in the distance the skirl of the bagpipes as William Mackintosh and his Highlanders marched south towards town. Now, they weren't the first Jacobites to arrive here. There were already Jacobite borderers under William Gordon, Viscount of Kenmure. There were Jacobites from the north of England under Thomas Forster. He was the MP for Northumberland, and James Radcliffe, the Earl of Derwentwater. Now you have a group of Jacobites in Kelso that includes Catholics, Anglicans, Scottish Episcopalians and Presbyterians, Highlanders, Lowlanders and English, all united for the Jacobite cause. Okay, not entirely united. The Scots carried partisan Scottish banners which raged against the Union. And they wore blue and white cockades in their hats, whilst the English Jacobites wore red and white ones. But other than that, they were in total unity. There may be trouble ahead. We didn't have to wait long for the trouble. When it was suggested that this army cross the border, the Highlanders refused. They were coaxed, cajoled, and finally surrounded by the Northumbrian English cavalry. The Highlanders cocked their muskets and said, if we're going to die fighting, let's do it in our own country. Okay, what if we give you an extra sixpence a day? Aye, all right, we'll go as far as Hawick, but we're no crossing the border. At Hawick, it was agreed that the Highlanders would cross the border, but they were free to desert whenever they wanted. And as they marched south, the Jacobite army captured the toll booths and excise buildings in every town and confiscated the taxes, on behalf of the rightful king, of course. The Scottish Highlands weren't the only area of Jacobite support. Lancashire in England was very Catholic and strongly Jacobite. Manchester was a hotbed of Jacobites. These people would rise and join the throng. So the plan was to continue south, liberating tax revenues and collecting recruits as they went, making key stops in Lancaster, Preston, and end up in the port of Liverpool, which they could defend whilst receiving arms, supplies and reinforcements from France. This would be the bridgehead from which they would take England back from the Hanoverian usurpers. Meanwhile, the Hanoverian usurpers had mobilised local militias and they locked up Catholics, just in case. Okay, so that's going to reduce the Jacobite options. But when the Jacobite force routed militia forces at Penrith, they were on a roll. And on the 8th of November, they reached Preston. Hanoverian forces had retreated south. Jacobite forces felt confident. Maybe overconfident. And what happened next may have been crucial. You see, if the Preston welcome wasn't warm, it was certainly much more than tepid. Preston was pro-Jacobite, with lots of Catholics or High Church Anglicans. English Jacobite recruits were arriving in the town, and some Preston residents would later be hung for lending support. So the Jacobite army enjoyed the hospitality offered by the locals. They'd done a lot of marching. They deserved a bit of downtime. When the Penrith route's behind you and the Preston reception is upon you, Liverpool doesn't seem nearly as urgent, does it? The problem was that as they dawdled, under the radar, Hanoverian forces were gathering in Wigan. Forster, the Northumberland MP, who was now in charge of the Jacobite forces, went to bed to recover from a bout of heavy drinking as government forces approached for the Preston fight, which has been described as the last English battle. Now, given that the infantry in the approaching Hanoverian force were staunchly Presbyterian Cameronians and the Jacobite force were predominantly Highlanders, it's interesting to note that England's last battle was largely a fight between Lowland Scots on one side and Highland Scots on the other. The defenders mounted the barricades around Preston to prepare for the coming attacks. They held the first assault, leaving heavy Hanoverian losses. The second assault led to more of the same. A third assault, and as night fell, the Jacobites had held firm. The problems came the following morning as a larger government force arrived. Forster, the drink-sleeping MP, woke up to regret his long lie 2 days before. The Jacobites had revelled in landlocked Preston when they should have been heading for the port of Liverpool. The Highlanders had always been suspicious of crossing the border, but the right to desert meant little now that they were surrounded on all sides. But it wasn't the Highlanders who were seeking an escape route. Forster, their Northumbrian leader, had looked at the size of the arriving government force and his own dwindling supplies and ammunition and decided to seek terms from the newly arrived besieging commander. But he didn't feel it was necessary to consult the Highlanders under his command. When they heard that he'd accepted unconditional terms, they were furious. Ultimately, however, surrender was made, as Jacobites further north frittered away their numerical advantage in a messy draw at the Battle of Sherrifmuir. The 1715 uprising was effectively over. But don't switch off there, because what I'm going to tell you next may have been what sealed the fate of Bonnie Prince Charlie 30 years later. 19th century workmen digging around the Friars Gate in Preston found the remains of a large man buried with a claymore. Undoubtedly a Highland casualty of 1715. Highlanders famously crossed the border in 1745. But they had to deal with the consequences of Highlanders crossing the border in 1715. You see, after the inconclusive Battle of Sherrifmuir in Perthshire, clansmen disappeared back into impenetrable Highland glens, and many of the leaders escaped to France. General Wade would be given the task of building roads into the Highlands so that government troops could get to them in future. But for now, it was another country. The prospects for those captured at the Siege of Preston were much worse. The commoners faced the gruesome prospect of being hung, drawn and quartered. Of the Jacobite leaders at Preston, Lord Derwentwater, Lord Kenmure and Lord Nitsdale were all sentenced to meet an axeman. Little wonder then that 30 years later, when the Blue Bonnets crossed the border again, few English Jacobites were prepared to raise their heads. Lord Kenmure had his cut off. Lord Derwentwater had his cut off. Lord Nitsdale, well, that's a story for another video. If you like this one, then give it a thumbs up and share it. In the meantime, why not watch some of my other Jacobite videos in the playlist coming up now? Hami and Dochas going to be Lama alive. Cheerio and Rasta.